Welcome, everyone. My name is Irene Maslowski. I'm an adjunct professor at New York University, and I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chair for PRSA's Educators Academy. This year, IPR and PRSA EA have rebranded the virtual discussion, Race in the PR Classroom, to Diversity in the PR Classroom. This rebrand enables us to expand our conversations beyond race and to address the challenges and opportunities in DEI as they evolve for both professors and students. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize our sponsor, the Moody College of Communications at the University of Texas in Austin. Thank you once again for supporting diversity in the PR classroom. IPR and PRSA's Educators Academy have been partnering on race in the PR classroom since June of 2020. In that time, we have featured BIPOC leaders talking about race in the classroom, but today we're going to have a discussion about the importance of pedagogy and mindfulness in the classroom. First, I'd like to welcome Tara L. Smith, Program Director of the MA in Strategic Communication and Instructor of Strategic Communication and Public Relations for the University of Delaware. She's also the founder of Tara Lynn Communications, an independent public relations consultancy. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kathleen Donohue Rennie. Kathleen is a combination of full-time public relations professional and full-time professor at New Jersey City University. Our third panelist today is Dr. Nandini Bahala. Nandini is assistant professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Texas State University. Nandini is also the co-chair of the DEI committee at the Educators Academy. And last but not least, we welcome Dr. Kirsten Bergstrom. Kirsten is a paleoanthropologist, a big word, and she's going to tell us exactly what that is. She's also a lecturer in the School of Biological Sciences at Washington State University, Tri-Cities. Thank you all so much for being here and sharing your personal experiences with us. Lastly, before we begin, a few housekeeping rules. This is a Q&A type forum. To ask a question, feel free to drop it into the chat or raise your virtual hand. Once you're called on, please remember to state your name and your organization. If you would like to ask a question anonymously, please type the question to the hosts in the chat and we will read your question. Only the moderators can see the question, so you will remain anonymous. Today's session is being recorded and will be available for playback on Monday. Lastly, please remain respectful to our host and everyone else on the call by keeping yourselves muted at all times, unless, of course, you intend to speak. So let's get started with our conversation. Nandini, I'm going to start with you because I want to hear about how you define mindfulness. I know that you have a personal practice in mindfulness, and you also have been working to bring it into the classroom. So what is your definition? We hear, I think everybody, when we talk just in commonality, we all have a different idea of what that means. Do we need to practice this an hour every day? Can we get benefit from 5 minutes? And of course, we'll be talking about how we're bringing that into the classroom. So I'd like to hear how you define mindfulness.
Thank you, Nitra, and I'm very grateful to be part of this panel. And thank you for giving an opportunity to speak what we do in our classroom and how we can enhance mindfulness practices in our classroom. So coming back to the question, how I define mindfulness, what I think of the mindfulness. The American word mindful is exactly what it doesn't mean to. It doesn't mean mindful. When we really talk about mindful, it sounds like just mind is full of chatter. That's what our mind is usually most of the time, chattering something. So much is going on in our mind, but this is exactly what mindfulness is. So just to explain a little better, I would share two pictures in a minute. Thank you. If it has dropped, exactly mindfulness means from picture 1 to getting to picture two. We always think about so many things, our life, our financial thing, our mental health, our physical health, the job, so much is going on in our life constantly, and our mind is constantly juggling with that. So mindful practices or mindfulness exactly means is like thinking one thing at a time. Just be in that moment, focus on that one problem you have in your mind, whether it's your job or is your personal life, just focusing on that. The second picture talks about inner engineering. Okay, I follow this Isha Foundation, and I've done that inner engineering program. So that helped me becoming more mindful and able to realize where I was to where I am right now, when I'm focusing one thing at a time while other things try to overpower you. But mindful exactly means is as one problem at a time, one situation at a time. So yeah, thank you.
Kathy, how do you define mindfulness?
To me, it says a lot. Also there's so much going on. So it has a lot to do with that theme. It's really checking in rather than checking out. And for me, that check-in as an educator is making sure that I am present for other people. So making sure that I'm checked in with myself enough to be present, and then really being mindful about the connections that I'm making with students. So whether it's looking them in the eye, but really, that takes all of us. The students are dealing with so much right now, post-COVID, mid exam time, or preparing for exams right now. And so are we, right? And they're full of drama, and we have other things going on. So to me, it really means checking in with myself so that I don't check out, and particularly to be present to others who at different times in the semester need you to be even like super checked in to where they are and the many things that they're dealing with, and sort of what's under the drama, because and sometimes they don't even know. So I know we're going to be talking about this, but really helping them to learn how to check in on themselves.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is, it reminds me a little bit of when we get on the airplane and, they go through the whole rendition of safety, and they say, when the mask drops down, don't put it on the child, put it on yourself first, because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others, right? So it isn't just, I think we are going to be talking more about it, but just not the concept of bringing it into the classroom, but looking at ourselves, carefully first. We can't be effective for them if we are not effective, for ourselves. Kirsten, what is your interpretation or your definition of mindfulness?
I just wanted to say thank you. I'm so happy to be here and to hear everyone's opinion. I think about this all the time, and I'm asked this often by students. So I really think that mindfulness is about an intentional action to cultivate awareness, I would say, in the present, but also being curious, being kind and compassionate when we're not able to do that, or like what has been talked about before, when we experience suffering or discomfort, being able to be present and sit with those feelings, validate them, be with them. I think that all of that is, for me, ultimately what mindfulness means.
So I just want to jump back to the question I have, and I think perhaps all of us have, is, and I mentioned it earlier, what is a big word, paleoanthropologist? So all of us are here in the PR space, right? And you bring up so much to this conversation, but what does that mean? What is that?
The easiest way to think about it is I study our evolutionary past. So I study our evolutionary ancestors, the environment, all things having to do with a very specific fraction of human evolution.
Okay. All right, good. Interesting. Okay. And Tara, hi, welcome, Tara. We're just discussing the question and posing it to you is, how do you define mindfulness? of us are in a mindfulness practice. Some are, already have been bringing it into the classroom. But I think it's such a broad term that it means something different to everybody. I mean, I have spoken to people that are able to get on the subway in New York and just do some mindfulness, for like 5 minutes. I don't know how you do that. Got to have a really strong will and determination, but apparently it is possible, right? So we all have a different definition. What is your definition of mindfulness?
Thanks, Irene. I would say for me, it's really about committing to taking a moment out of my busy day to really set aside time to be present and to breathe. And I think what really distinguishes it for me is it's a mindset for sure, but I also think it's about being active in being mindful. Making sure you're really dedicating some time, whether that's in the classroom or at home, to just stepping away from the chaos of everyday life and letting your brain like just think for a minute, just not think, in fact, step away and not think for a second, just really helps to free you up a little bit and gives you that space to breathe.
Yeah, it's so hard to do though, isn't it? We have so many distracting, distractions going on. And I know whenever I've practiced mindfulness, I have to, it's pushing that stuff back out, like trying to stay focused on one thing, which all of us can do, but we're not used to being in kind of that vacuum, right? Where we have to focus on one thing because we're so used to multiple things going on all the time, right? So Kathy, why do you think enhancing mindfulness is important, bringing it into the classroom? Why do you think that's important, and why is it important for for us, but for the students certainly?
Yeah, and it's another reason why I was so thankful to be part of this, but also just that you're tackling this, because students right now are having such a difficult time engaging and being mindful in the classroom. And what I'm hearing from employers is that they're also having a tough time engaging as new employees as well, because they may be joining their teams 2 days a week. They're lucky. Sometimes they're just online. Their superiors are online. So it's really hard to engage and get to know others. So I think particularly now at NJCU where I am, we have in-person, hybrid, and online. And so interestingly, we have the students that are in the classroom are doing well, but they also still need to be engaged and understand what mindful is and do the check-in with them. But I think it's particularly hard for the students who have a choice. It's easier to not check in. It's easier just to be a name on a screen, right? And when it's hybrid, I'm not here in your face like an online class, right? I'm teeny tiny up in a classroom, and it's so disconnected for them. So at a time when they're coming back and they're trying to re-engage and they've almost forgot how to do that, it's so important for us to give them examples of how we're doing that in our own lives, and then helping them to get there and to actually live that and show them by our actions towards them and taking time with them and checking in with them what mindfulness is all about. But I think I have never, it's almost worse than in COVID. COVID, we were like people wanted to be present because it was something to do, or, it was comforting. It seems like there's this difficult path to getting back.
Yeah, I think you brought up two really, really good points there. COVID certainly, but I think what you just said just now with COVID, we were all in it together, right? We had no choice of being able to be hybrid or to be in person, and we were all kind of, I don't want to say as a team, but we were, together. The other thing that I think you brought up is, which I think is, concerning, and I mean, our role as educators is not just to educate them or get them through to get that degree, but prepare them for the outside world. And I hear similar comments to what you brought up about, especially like undergrads starting out at their first job and having some difficulty because they are not present. And the business world doesn't believe in, or any part of the work world, I should say, does not believe in not being present. So this is, I think it's just an important piece that needs to, obviously go into the classroom. Nandini, what about you? Why do you think that it's important? You are already doing it. I know you have some part of a practice in the classroom, correct? Of that you're bringing to students. So maybe you could share that with us.
Yeah, sure. So I will give that answer in two ways. Like one, there is a problem, and second, it helps in solution. So the one is the problem that many surveys have again and again telling about mental health problem among college students are on rise. Referring back to what you said, Kathy said, pandemic is a big cause of it. Because of the pandemic, it's on our face. It's like elephant in the room. You cannot shut your eye. Like that's there. Students are suffering. We see them. It's impacting us as well, who are like on the front face of dealing with students day in and out. Just last in 2 days, 2 students have cried in front of me. And this is the last week. May 1st is the last day of my classes. And I have, as a professor, the front face, I have to maintain that, tough phase, like confident, being present, and able to deal with them. So mindful practices is the only way out to handle situation that we are dealing right now at this moment. So there is a problem. And also many surveys again and again mention the suicide rate among students have increasing. Just in one state, it says there's a one survey is in Missouri. One state, it says that 1 out of 4 students said that they thought about suicide in this past year. That's into 2021. This is alarming. This is on our face now. So there is a problem. So the solution is mindfulness practices in the classroom. Yes, we have to teach them skills, but there is a way we integrate that. So what mindful practice does, I would like to explain in a very simple words. Like what I think it does is 3 E's. That helps in 3 E's. 1, emotional intelligence is again tied back to what we are doing. We are teaching them skills to become a better practitioner. Yes, we always talked about IQ, but there is a time we need to have a better EQ to be better than the rest of the crowd, job-seeking crowd. So definitely it increases in EQ. It makes you become more emotionally intelligent, makes you more present, able to connect with other people better. And that's kind of workforce is needed in the future. That's what we needed. Second, E is energy. It brings positive energy. Whenever I teach, even like whenever I do even 10 minutes of meditation practices, which is like free available online, I see there is a surge of positive energy in the classroom. We all feel so calm. There's very positive. The negativity of like anxiety and all that's kind of calm down for a second and like able to open our eyes and feel very centered. So that's what it does. It brings positive energy in us and our surrounding. Third, it helps you become an evolved person. We all are like so lost in thoughts that we've been talking all the time. It helps you become a little bit more like present, being more loving, being more patient. All that we need, I feel like all of us, including me, a little bit of more patience, because we kind of in a world where everything is fast, like Instagram, instant noodles, instant ordering food, instant like publicity, instant gaining information. This all is adding anxiety, nothing else. It's just adding up. We have no patience. So mindful practices definitely help bringing those patience. Is like everything will come. We have to give our best, first thing. And second thing, just wait for the right time. It will come to us. No amount of hard work ever go waste in anyone's life. And that kind of like sensitivity and like being patient and loving, it makes us an evolved person. So that's my long answer to your short question.
Good answer. So 2 things. I think patience is a very important word, and I know I have to address that myself very often, just with everyday tasks. Yesterday, I got stuck at a very small checkout line at the grocery store with all kinds of drama going on because of the price not there, and then just so much stuff. And I felt myself I was tired. I came home from teaching and I wanted to get home, and then I said to myself, this is not such a big deal, right? It's not, and you have to kind of pull yourself back. I'm going to circle back to you with a question because I'm very interested to hear how, when you first introduced the mindfulness into the classroom, the reaction of the students. So we'll come back to that question afterwards. Tara, what do you think? How do you think enhancing mindfulness is important in the college classroom? What is your feeling?
Absolutely. And I have to say, I mean, I think we're all aware of the fact we live in a much more polarized society than 5, 10, 15 years ago, but especially here in the United States. So everyone really needs that mental health checkup, that validation that mental health is just as important as physical health, but our students especially, they need that support. And I'll just note, since this is, again, the diversity in the PR classroom series, especially our underrepresented and our marginalized students, whether that's race, ethnicity, disability, orientation, all of those groups are under more stress and anxiety than ever before. So to me, our role in the classroom, and the reason I think it's important, is we have to be mindful that when we're getting ready to step in front of them, whether that's on the computer or in the classroom, and to teach, there's this barrier that we have to be mindful of, that they are dealing with every day, and they're not necessarily seeing that support outside of the classroom. So we are a way to, again, just help them bridge that gap and take a minute to step outside of everything they're going through and clear their heads so that they can benefit from what we're teaching in the classroom, understand how that helps them in the internships and the jobs they want to pursue. But we can't help them right now if they are completely stressed out, zoned out. And I think, to Nandini's point, you see them walk into the classroom and have that stress that they're carrying around on their shoulders right now. So it's always been important, but I think now more than ever, they really need our support.
Yeah. So Kirsten, you've done a lot of research on the topic, and of course are taking that research and bringing it into practice in your classroom for quite some time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So how do you see this? You obviously know it's important to bring it, into the college classroom, but how do you include it into your professional area when you are teaching? And any examples too, examples if you could share with everyone.
Yeah. I would like to echo everything that has already been said here, right? We do know that the research tells us that mindfulness can help with attention spans, help us to remain calm, especially when we're catastrophizing mistakes or missteps, right? Like when you're like, oh my gosh, like I got a really bad grade, everything is over. I don't know what to do, right? I've had a seated meditation practice for about 3.5 years, and I've also incorporated other mindfulness. And for myself, I realized that I've been a better listener in the classroom as well. And as I have integrated different mindfulness practices into my classroom setting, I've seen better retention by improved quizzes, improved tests. I've also seen students really open up and start to interact when I'm desperately looking for that interaction, right? Students also often joke that I can feel really comfortable in discomfort. So like if they don't know an answer, we can sit in what could maybe feel like an uncomfortable silence until we kind of get there. So those are some of the things that I've seen. But in my professional arena, I'm the chair of a pedagogy working group on the National Day of Racial Healing here at Washington State University. And for the National Day of Racial Healing, last year was the first year that we've taken part in it. I ran everything on my campus. I did a guided self-compassion mindfulness practice. I also work with a dear colleague and friend, Tremaine Gaither, where we offer a mindfulness-based anti-racism 6-part series. I also do a lot of it in my volunteer work, but really, to be perfectly honest, as I've gotten passionate about mindfulness, I have found that I am better at being a self-compassionate mess. I'm still a mess, right? That is still very much part of the practice, but I can meet myself and others with more compassion. And that also helps me perform at like a higher level within research, within the classroom, and in personal areas of my life, while also being kind to myself when I do make those missteps and mistakes.
So can you give us any specific examples of what you are actually doing in the classroom? Like to give us a little bit of a visual of how that works.
Yes. So when students are really struggling in my classroom, like I do a check-in with them often. And if they're really, really having a hard time, or we've had a really, really bad exam, I actually do a mindfulness practice that's called the self-compassion break. It can be a 5 to like 15-minute practice, but it's one where you can very easily even look it up online, or I'm happy to send resources afterwards. I also sometimes will do a meditative practice on how would you treat a friend. So I'll ask them, like, if you had a friend right now who failed it, right, what would you say? And then I'll say, open your eyes now, write down what you'd say to a friend, try and say it to yourself. I also, on exams and in labs, I build in entire sections of my test that are just for them to stop and take a breath. And I typically do it after a pretty hard question, so they can just kind of have a moment to collect themselves. And they all hit it at about the same time, which works out nicely because everybody kind of takes part in it together. So I think it depends on the classroom, but I have lots of different little tips and tricks. I also have a mindfulness deck of cards that I'm pretty known for carrying around. I think it's back here somewhere. That if students see me and they're having like a rough day, they'll be like, I really need a card on rest, or I really need a card on something. And I'll just give them a mind, and it has a little mindfulness practice on the back. That's like
that's a great tool. Yeah.
yeah. It's an easy one too. You just carry it with you. Right?
Yeah, but it's there. It's
Yeah.
and I think one of the words that I heard that jumped out, which I think is a big issue for a lot of, young people and adults as well, is self-compassion. I think we're in a society where so much is expected of us. And in our mind, it might not be in anybody else's mind, but in our mind or the student's mind, is that we're a failure because we got the F on the test, or we didn't do very good on this, writing this assignment. And it's very debilitating, and that kind of behavior leads to a lot more problems, down the road. So Nandini, I know you are incorporating it in the classroom. Can you give us a few examples of how you are doing this?
Sure. The first thing I want to talk about is like whatever you're saying is very, very relatable. So when I came as a PhD student in 2015, not so long ago, exactly this was I was feeling. Very, very hard on myself. Every B on any class, like any class was like so hard on myself. I was like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing great. I've left my country. I'm here. I'm alone. But I can't even do this. Oh my God. So, and also like in a PhD in academic setup, then you talk to everyone else. And then it's like, yeah, go to psychiatrists, go for counseling. It's normal. We take pills. So we kind of like have normalized being not okay. Normalize that, yes, mental health problem is okay in academia. Yeah, you don't know, everyone is going through this. That's normal. And coming from a part of the country where we do not even talk about mental health, like if we talk about mental health means like, oh my God, you're done, you're gone, you're done. And coming from that part of a country and suddenly here, which is like normal to do that, it just was a whole another level of shock for me to deal with. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to not navigate that. But I'm realizing more and more the process of self-loathing was setting in, being very, very self-critical. I was like super ambitious, gotta do it. I've done so far, I've reached so far, I gotta do it. Again, the load of first generation as well. I'm first generation PhD and like only person here. So a lot of load I was carrying on my shoulder. So now as the process begins after my PhD, again, going back to what you said, what Kristen said about self-compassion, I think through mindful practices, especially after PhD, that process started healing me inside. I started loving myself more. I was forgiving my own mistakes of not getting A or not getting that particular award or that grant or that thing I applied, whatever that I'm doing as a professor, as a scholar, as a service to the industry. I'm not getting everything. I'm supposed not to get everything, right? This is the process of failures and successes, right? So I become less critical of myself. I'm like, it's okay, it's a process. It doesn't happen. Maybe I'll try again. Maybe it will not happen. Whatever happens, it's a process. I'm into it. So the more I started accepting myself, started less hating myself, more I was able to connect with my students. I was able to like forgive their mistakes as well. I started accepting it's okay. They're supposed not to get A's, everything. They're supposed to make mistake. The classes is a place to make mistake. They should make mistake. And I started conveying them to them as well. It was like, hey, okay, it's okay to make mistake. Making mistake in the classroom has less stakes than making mistakes in office. Like that's where the place. Make mistake, be creative, be original. So I think this whole love, self-compassion is amazing. This is where everything starts. Everything starts here, like from you, with you. So that's one thing. And second thing, I have I'm gonna share one link here. Just a sec. This is what I have done in my class. It's a free yoga on again from the Isha Foundation that I follow. They have a free yoga thing online. So I pulled this up on my big screen on classes, and I'm like, okay, we're going to do meditation together, and whichever we can do, you can like fold your legs or be just on the chair, whichever, put up the light, and we do this like there are 3 parts to it, and we do this like 12 minutes together. And I feel there's such rise in energy in the class. This is free, and I've actually, people come to me. One student told me, like, I also do this at home once in a while whenever I feel overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And there's a one girl who said that when I was offering in the classes, one girl is like, okay, I was going for what do you call it, injection, here syringe, because of whatever reason, I have to go to doctor, and I was very nervous. Thank you for doing this. I feel much better. So I have come across this positive anecdotes. And students are usually open to different experiences. Yeah. So I'll ask about, yes, I do have encountered some pushback as well, but whenever you ask me a question later on. So
Okay, yeah, I'm going to come back to that. So I think the one thing I hear you say, and I think I hear all of you saying, and I think most of us, all of us would agree, we want to turn it into self-compassion before it becomes self-loathing, right? Because once it gets to that level for anybody, it's really hard to, I think, find the way back. And, young people, they don't have the experiences that we've had that maybe we can think back to. We can look at a trajectory of how we did make a mistake and how we learned and how we did so much better, and that maybe that mistake was actually really beneficial for us, but they don't understand. They don't understand that. Tara, what are you doing in the classroom, or how are you working either with students individually or as a group, or how is that working for you with your students? And your students are mostly grad students, right? So they may have a double whammy of being in the classroom and perhaps working full-time or working as well. So they've got two pillars coming at them at the same time.
Yes, that's a great point. So a lot of the students that I teach who are online and who are juggling work and school at the same time, it's funny, a lot of our discussion boards will come back to these topics of how do we best prepare for what they're dealing with at work, what they're dealing with in our program, and incorporate some mindfulness into it. So a lot of times we share tips. Sharing links and resources has been really interesting because everyone has so many different opinions on what they find most helpful. And I've been surprised, honestly, at how crowdsourcing some of that when you're in an online environment it's just an easy, convenient way for everyone to now have this long list of things they can check out and use. But one of the things I've shared with them, and I use this personally too, are just any apps that they can have on their phone with them throughout the day, whether they're running to pick up a kid from school or they're logging in online at night after dinner. Having apps like Headspace, for example, like I'm a big fan of that one in particular. They have, and I'm sure other apps have this too, they have apps that not only help you to take a minute for yourself, but even just to boost your productivity, to get you to clear your mind before you sit down to write that paper for class or that memo for your client. Like they get you to clear the cobwebs out of your brain a little bit and focus, which is helpful. So a lot of our students find that meditation, mindfulness is great for relaxing, but also for helping them to get through the work that they're doing in a graduate program. It just gives them a chance to, again, separate all of the chaos of their busy days and to come and sit for a few minutes and just have that space, have that time carved out. And one other tip too, that a lot of my students follow this, and I've been doing it myself too, is we try to actually schedule some time on the calendar at least once a week, if not every day, if you can, where you say, this is going to be my 10 minutes that I'm going to take. And I actually encourage my students to do this. Just like they schedule time in an online program to read the material, to do the discussion boards, take that 10 minutes to disconnect, to unplug. And a lot of them have found that to be really helpful. If it's on the calendar, they will do it. So I know that might sound a little silly, but I know for me, it keeps me accountable, and it seems to work for my students too.
I don't think it's silly at all. I think that, an analogy to that is, if we need to go to the gym, I just had this discussion with my husband who just, signed up to go to the Y, and he's been going, and he kind of some days he doesn't want to go and thinking he should go every day. But I said to him, you don't have to go every day. You can go every other day. You can go 3 times a week as long as you get enough of it in. But the idea is that it's like anything else. You have to schedule it. If it's not on the schedule, it's probably not going to happen. right? And then we evolve into the same old behavior over and over again. We don't really get past what, what the obstacle is. So I think that's great. And tips are always great. And apps are another thing that, I had not thought of myself, that an app could be really, really helpful as well. So Kathy, what about you? What are some of the examples? I know you talk to your students a lot and you're certainly always there for them, but what are some of the, the techniques or things that you find are working to help get through a lot of the, the humps, so to speak?
Yes, so some of mine are like, they're sneaky, and they really combine the pedagogy and mindfulness or conscious, me on the part of trying to be really conscious of trying to figure out what they need. So some of the ways that I do this is when we do case studies, I'm super conscious of the content in the case study. So if we're having a case study of a crime, then we use this one case study of the Just Do It campaign. Maybe people use that campaign.
Yeah.
And, being really conscious that it could trigger some folks, make not feel, all kinds of emotions. So I make sure that I tell them in the beginning, this is what this case is about. If this is going to make you feel a certain way, you don't have to answer the questions. We can talk about it later. Just letting them be mindful that some topics, it's okay to feel a certain way, and they shouldn't just have to do the campaign, the questions, and get even more stressed out. The other thing is that everybody can use, and it's really simple, is when you're teaching writing, for our press releases and blog posts and writing assignments, I have them cover things like the counseling center or a new yoga studio downtown. And so the university just partnered with the Jeb Foundation for emotional health and suicide prevention. And so that actually the university asked us, our students, to write the press release for that partnership. And so, really trying to seek the resources and the folks who have the resources on campus, and then us write about it. And then students are like, I never knew that we had all these people on campus that could help us, even if it's just like the writing hub. Students are so stressed out about doing their assignments, not being able to write, trying to organize their time, and or even the library. Our client this semester in the campaigns class is the library, and I'm stunned by students who were coming up to me saying, I would have been so less stressed out if I knew all about these things, years ago. And they're there, but now they're really getting their hands dirty with it. So mine is, it's really being really careful and mindful about what I think they need, and then changing the assignment. If I think a class really needs sort of counseling center stuff, I'll just say, okay, today's we're gonna talk about, this is the fact pack on the counseling center. Let's do a timed press release and see how you do. And ultimately we end up talking about those things. So that's the other thing. It opens up the door to talking about the things that people are dealing with in the classroom. And I think the other thing is just how you come into the classroom. This is the end of the year, so students are talking about, we're doing a lot of wrap-up sessions, and a lot of them are like, I was so freaked out coming into your class. I was so stressed out. But then when you said that you gave us time to redo things and you coached us through things, I think it's really, there's such crazy stuff. We all know that Rate My Professor, there's all, the angry kids, or the kids that don't do well, or the quickest to post. And so kids come in with that. A student just said yesterday, I saw your Rate My Professor and I was freaked out. You're nothing like that. I said, well, yeah, that's what other people are saying. You shouldn't get caught up in those kinds of things too, whether it's online, but so I think really saying over and over again, my job is to coach you and to make you better. This is a place where you can make mistakes, and it's not just once. It's amazing to me how many times it's important to remind them of that over and over and over again, via text, via email, on Zoom, in the classroom. That message sinks in for different people at different times.
Yeah. And I think what I hear you saying too is that, of course we have to judge them on the output of their work, but it's not being judgmental. And I think it's a space for them often that they can come to where they can have these open conversations and not feel that they're being maybe, judged on that part of it. And also writing is, I mean, all of us here, I think would probably agree that writing is so cathartic, and that you can often just get those thoughts and those feelings out on paper. And even if it doesn't go anywhere, it just makes you feel better that you're expressing your, more of your feelings. So Nandini, you have, as we said, have early on brought this, practice into the classroom. So I'm curious to hear how students reacted. Did you come in one day and say, guess what, class, we're going to start a mindfulness 10 minutes today, and we're going to close our eyes and whatever, and block everything out? And if you did it that way, I'd really like to hear what kind of pushback you got, but I'd like to hear your view and what kind of pushback you actually did get.
Okay, so thank you for asking this question. Okay, so I have few layers. For example, like I'm coming from an eastern part of the world where this meditation and all that started. So if someone like Asian, where the yoga practice actually started in India, like if you go back by like 1,000 years back. So if someone like Indian who's saying about doing like meditation practices in the class, people will raise eyes. It's like, oh, what are you trying to like bring something from your country to our classes? What are you trying to do? And being Hindu and being the controversies around the yoga meditation is all over the US and Western world. So I have to be very, very careful when I'm talking about this. I do have advantages that I belong to that country. So I know exactly the purest form of meditation yoga in that country while growing up. So I do have that advantage. So I have to be very careful about like how I talk in the class about talking about this. So I often talk about my struggle as a student in the class. So they're able to connect with them. And the place I am is the minority majority, is mostly first generation students. So I'm able to connect with them in that way as well, being brown. And often talk about I'm first generation and I understand what it means to be. I'm like, I have a lot of responsibility when I came here as alone, leaving family behind. So that helped me connecting with them. So when I'm introducing, when I've connected with them, it makes it a little easier, a little less pushback. So that's there. And also when I really talk about meditation, like doing meditation, I just go, as I think Katie mentioned about it. I just go in the classroom and just talk. My initial 10 minutes is just go there and like reading everyone like faces. So if I feel like everyone is really anxious, I'm like, okay, how many classes you have? How many assignments are there? How many exams are there this week? Just check in with everyone for like 10 minutes. So I see like, okay, there's a lot of anxiety. Then I bring into a very subtle way, like, okay, I see a lot of anxiety is there. I see a lot of deadlines are there. How about we do 10 minutes meditation together? Like, ease it up. I will be more productive. We'll be better doing this together. And I'll do with you. If you feel like this is going to be a funky thing, yes, I'll be equally fun and funky with you. I'll be doing just right, like sitting with you, and I'll make all that noises and like do all funky things with you. So don't worry about it. Do be you, and we all close our eyes. So that, like just like little like mellow the things that really helps connecting with them and like encouraging them. I had a discussion about this with the director as well. And I told them like, I have to do all of that. So another thing, like, and I told them like, if you still feel uncomfortable doing it, you don't have to do with me. Just be there, do not make noise. And you have all the right to leave the room. Let's just leave now and come back after 10 minutes, do whatever you want to do it. Come back after 10 minutes so you don't disturb anyone. So it's not nice you make noises. So if you can stay here, you can stay here. Just be yourself. Don't follow us. So I give them all the freedom, do everything. So, but I see 99% of the students do with me. Maybe 1% in one class may not do with us. And another thing is like students are open to new experiences, new culture. And I'm like, I'm exotic apparently from other country. So they wanted to experience something different, what she's going to do. So that really worked. That's how I have to like bring certain things in the class, and then usually that works. But yes, there are times when students don't do it, but then they just sit there on their phone. Yeah. And sometimes they just leave the room. Yeah.
So Kirsten, what advice would you give other professors who are experiencing pushback or lack of enthusiasm? I mean, what would you tell us that we can, what advice would you give us? We've got the practice started, but they're pushing back and, they're still on their phone or whatever. What would you suggest that we do?
So I've had some of this happen, but to be perfectly honest, the research is in. Mindfulness is good for you. Starting in about 1966, there have been a little over 17,000 peer-reviewed publications on the reasons that mindfulness is good for you. And within that, there are, I believe it's about 378 on mindfulness in the classroom, right? So, but we also know that from that research, there can be 8 to 10% of the population that it doesn't quite work for. And those reasons can be huge, right? So sometimes I tell students that, like, you might not really like this, and it could be because you're not ready. It could be that this is not the meditation or mindfulness practice that is for you. Don't worry, we're going to try a different one later. And if not, you get 5 to 10 minutes in class to just take a breath, right? You just get to kind of sit and like chill out for a minute, and there can't be anything too bad about that. I haven't had any pushback from students, though. I have had some pushback from peers or other people asking why it's important. And I'll drop in the chat a publication that goes through like all of the things that I just talked about that you can very easily pull up. It has beautiful diagrams. They've done the work, for you.
Good. So Tara, how would you suggest that as professors, we get started, even in, just baby steps or just that first step forward to getting started to bringing in mindfulness practice into the classroom?
I mean, I think it comes down to being true to what works for you, right? Like, I'm not necessarily going to feel comfortable doing a guided meditation myself in the classroom, but I have no problem playing one in the class, right? But there are ways you can incorporate it, I think, both in the classroom and online. So I'll give an example of each. So in the classroom on campus, when I'm teaching undergraduates, I open every single class with something called Professor Smith's Keep It at 100. And I use this as my moment to usually relate it to what we're going to talk about in class that day, but to just give my students a break from hearing a lecture, from having to do an activity, from having to be on. And we just talk, we keep it real, and we kind of open it up for them to ask me questions, to, just to kind of talk and, human to human, person to person, and not so much, I am the instructor and I'm going to sit here and talk to you today. So it kind of breaks the fourth wall, if you will. So for me, that's a really natural fit for me to just sit back and go, let me tell you what happens in the workplace when you get there that's not in your textbook. What are your questions? And it opens them up to feel a little more comfortable, to be honest about their vulnerabilities. So it's not necessarily a mindfulness practice, if you will, but it's my way of creating a space, a protected space where they can just breathe, think, and not feel that pressure to perform in class. And online, another thing I found really helpful, and I want to give a shout out to something Kathleen was saying earlier about not helping students not feel judged about their work and what they're turning in. When you're teaching online, especially if it's asynchronously, you lose sometimes that ability to have that face-to-face moment, especially if it's asynchronous. So what I have found useful in terms of lowering that stress level and helping my students to breathe a little when they're online, if they've done really poorly on an assignment, for example, I will record a video to walk through the feedback on where they missed the mark, rather than just doing, I know some of us probably use Canvas. Instead of just doing the annotated comments and writing the comment in SpeedGrader, which is very efficient, I like that. But if I am worried about a student maybe feeling that perhaps I'm judging them too harshly, or they're not going to read between the lines of what I'm writing, I take a minute to do a video. And I cannot tell you how many of my students have found those helpful. They feel that connection. They're getting that face on a screen talking to them through their assignment. And again, this is not specifically a mindfulness practice, but it's me trying to be mindful of where they're coming from. That they're probably rushing around in their busy work day, squeezing in grad school on the side, and they sit down and get an assignment back and it's not the grade they were expecting. So I'm trying to be mindful of where they're coming to the virtual classroom and having that personalized video to go, hey, I think maybe there was a little confusion here. Let me walk you through what's going on. So that's something I found really beneficial. And I know my students who are online really appreciate it.
I think that is such a great suggestion, because one thing that you brought out with the answer is that, with the grad students, we talked about this, of course, they're working, and many of them maybe have children or have families, they're juggling a lot of stuff. And you think that because you are older and you have been through undergrad and you've been working for years and you're responsible and you own a home or you've got a family and that, you're on top of everything. And then you get this paper back that is less than stellar, and it's devastating, right? Devastating. And that can really, I think, I don't want to say damage somebody's psyche, but it certainly can be very, it's just devastating. So that is a great idea of having the video, and it allays some of the fears. It keeps the anxiety down a little bit, because so much of what I think all of us go through, and certainly students, it all goes back to anxiety, doesn't it? I mean, that's kind of the core emotion that is happening today. So I think that's, definitely, a great idea. But now, Kathy, how do we get professors to do this? I mean, how do we, we're trying to recruit the students. I know I'm making this big mountain here, but how do we get other professors to understand the value? And I think what, everybody has said today is that all of the four of you all have a different way of bringing mindfulness the practice into the classroom. And I've gotten some great tips today from all of you, but how do we get other professors to kind of consider this? And we'll hear the complaints from our colleagues about, assignments aren't in, they were due 2 months ago, now they want credit for it, whatever. But how do we bring something like this in? How can we get others to really consider doing this?
And to me, that's the big question. I think that the students are much more open. I'm the chair of my department, so it's very difficult to try to get some individuals on my faculty team to be mindful of where the students are, right? To understand that they're in an online class. You don't just post a PowerPoint for, marketing analytics, and then they're going to know what they're doing. And they really push back at like record something. Tara, I'm a big believer in that, because even just hearing our voice, even just like a podcasty thing, and you're voicing out the slides. But I think those folks are tougher to get behind. And ultimately, what's so interesting to me is that it's the people on my team who are not mindful of where their students are, who have the most problems with students complaining. And that's the other thing that I've seen, this day of like rage emailing the president of the university because they got a C. I always tell them, if you get a parking ticket, do you call President Biden? And they're like, no, Dr. Rennie. I'm like, well, why are you writing the president of the university? Let's manage your stress. And because then we get a letter from the president, the vice president, the dean, they just CC everybody with this rage stuff. So I try to communicate to my team, if you want less drama, be more present, teach them how is the proper way to deal. Immediately if someone complains, about something that I can control, I say, let's Zoom right away. Like, here's my phone number, call me right now, let's talk through it. And ultimately it ends with the student saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know it was this easy, and talking about, so me sharing that with my faculty, but it's the harder struggle to get those folks engaged to do it. And I just always try to remind those folks who don't, because some people went online and they don't want to go back, but it's causing them problems because they're not as well engaged with the students. They're losing students. The students are not learning that way because they're all stressed out. And we all know that if you're a stressed out learner, you're not a learner. It's not going to get through. So, sharing some of the things that I do with them, and really just when things blow up saying, well, this happened with this other professor, and we immediately had a Zoom. I'm on the Zoom with the professor and the student, and it's solved like immediately when the student feels heard. But if you have these faculty members that just want to email back and forth and rage back with the email. And so I'm in that right now where some people are handling it beautifully, but the way that it's handled is immediately engaging. If you can't do it face to face, on a Zoom, and just talking about where people are and saying, yes, we're dealing with a lot of stress here. We understand why you flipped out and wrote the president, but here's a better way to handle it next time. But the faculty are there, there's still those among us who are much more difficult to get there, and they're having a more difficult time.
Yeah. Nandini, what about you? How do you encourage professors to adapt to this?
Yeah, sure. So the one quote I'm sharing here, I think this is kind of like crux of everything. Success is not a key to happiness. Happiness is a key to success. We have to think reverse. We constantly focusing on increasing skills, like learn that skill, this skill, do that. I think firstly, we have to, I think I kind of like touched on this in the beginning. Everything starts from here, like from me. Like if I'm happy, I'm able to give 100% to my task. If I am anxious, I'm like, oh my God, I have to do this. I have 1 hour. I'm 100% sure that I'm not able to give my 100%, forget about 100%, not able to give 50% to that task. If I'm not giving my 100% to a task, I must be a fool who's thinking that I'm going to get successful and get A in that task. Because I'm not even giving 100%. Why am I expecting 100 score in that? So for giving 100% to that task, you have to be 100% in that moment. You have to have like mindfulness, breathe, and able to like focus on that, give 100%, and definitely successes will come because you'll get A because you give 100%. And very, very rare chances you give 100% on task, you don't get success, right? So very rare chances, but that happens. This is life. So that's all crux I want to talk about is this really. I think we have to like now reverse thinking that we have to be in movement. We have to focus on this, whatever we have it, bring happiness, bring calmness, and do the task, whatever we are doing. I think our whole life is a journey of learning. We're always learning in some steps, but that doesn't mean that learning everything will bring us success. Like doing with 100% and happiness, I think bring that success. So we should think reverse. That's all I want to say.
So we have just a few minutes left. So quickly, I just want to go around, starting with Kirsten. What tips would you, last minute tips that you would perhaps, tips that you would quickly share with everyone?
I think that compassion is only complete and sustainable when it includes yourself. And so I think that as we practice mindfulness in the classroom, it also gives us that break. And I think that that's something as educators, we often put ourselves last. And so I would say that I think as you do it personally, it'll spill over professionally and into the classroom. And I know that it's hard, but so is teaching, right? And we can all do hard things. We do them every day.
Right. Okay,
yeah.
Good. Tara, what tip would you share with us?
My tip would be, in public relations, we are often the cheerleaders of our clients, of our companies, right? I think that this is a space where we can be cheerleaders for our students and help advocate for their mental health, help them to feel comfortable knowing that we support this and that we think it's important. I really think they need that from us now more than ever.
Okay, good. Kathy.
Just breathe. Sometimes I go throughout my day and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not even breathing. So, and to say that to, it's not like my new thing for my students is I just need to take a breath here or you need to just take a breath, like just please take a breath for me. They're breathless the way they're going through things. And sometimes my faculty are breathless about, can you believe they did this and they're not doing this? And let's take a breath, recenter. Let's think about where everybody is. Sometimes just taking a breath to check in, not to check out, or to engage in the drama. There's just so much on the roadways, in the classroom. Doesn't have to be all this, the whole thing, it's PR, not ER. It sounds so old now that everybody has said it, but we get new kids all the time. So just keep saying it. And that's a way to force them to take a breath, because when you're laughing, you have to breathe. So
that's right. And it gives you air when you laugh, right? We're putting oxygen in our bodies. Nandini, what kind of tips would you want to share?
I think everyone just covered everything very beautifully. I think we just have to be in the moment, focus on one task, give it 100% to it, and just self-compassion. I cannot emphasize enough in self-compassion. I think everything starts from here. Everything starts from one self. That's all. Yeah.
It's true, right? I mean, nothing gets done by, it's not I, it's we, right? With anything in life. And so if we do start with ourselves just a little bit, not try to set the bar so high that we can't achieve that, but a little bit would be, would be good. So we are just about out of time, and I want to thank everybody for joining us, and certainly our panelists for this great discussion. I know I've got a whole, page of notes for myself that I'm going to begin to look at and incorporate in my teaching, and just what a great wealth of knowledge and brain trust to this program. So we'll have a program in May. We will adjourn for the summer. We'll be back September through December. So I hope all of you will join us again. And thank you, everybody. So let's all be mindful, right? Okay, yes, peace. Okay, thanks, everybody.